This is the E-Free Lethbridge Podcast. Welcome to the E-Free Lethbridge Podcast. It's so great that you're joining us today. With us, we have the service pastor for the 9 a.m. service, the 11 a.m. service, the most community-minded person I know, Mark Dick.
And his birds.
And my real, this is real behind me, okay? The birds, the background, no fake. This is pure.
If you're listening and you hear chirp, 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 that's because Mark is sitting outside on his patio.
That's
and
right.
He's loving every minute of it.
Yep.
We have the Wonder Woman extraordinaire, Glenda Postman.
It's
Yeah.
this title, Dave. I'm sorry.
I love it.
And as a guest today, we have the wisest and the finest, Dave Acree.
Yay!
Oh, wow.
Yay.
And by the way, I have birds in my background too, but they are not real. That's
And not
where the
chirping.
chirping's coming
And
from.
not
Not chirping.
Yes.
Yeah.
They are not real, and there's no chirping from Dave's house.
Dave.
Welcome to the podcast, Dave. We're so glad you're here.
Yeah, welcome.
Well,
here.
I will tell you after it's done if I'm happy to be here.
We're happy you're here.
I can't wait.
We are happy. I am your host, Levi, and we're going to kick it off with a fun morning question. So today's fun morning question, what's your favorite homemade meal that you've had since the beginning of COVID isolation? No, we're cooking more at home, so
Yeah.
what's your
Mhm.
favorite meal that you've had?
Cooking more at home.
GP?
Okay,
Come
my
Yeah.
favorite. I actually cooked a really good meal yesterday for Father's Day because my dad loves like a meat and potato kind of meal. So I'm like, I should just make a traditional kind of meal. But it's fun to do something fancy. So I went to some of my fancy friends. Pam and Jana are both excellent cooks. And so I've got some ideas for recipes. And so I made this pork tenderloin in kind of this sweet gravy. It was amazing. Baked potatoes and beans and salad. Anyway,
Wow.
so yesterday
Well
was
done.
like 10 out of 10, especially because I was at church in the morning and had to scramble. So it was great.
Dave?
Well, yeah.
Dave, what's the
I
best
don't
meal
have
you've
favorite
cooked?
meals. I mean, food is a necessity to me. It's not something that I savor and it's good and stuff like that. It drives Julie mad sometimes because I'm that way. But I suppose the stuff that we cook out on the grill, whether it's salmon burgers or hamburgers or something on that level. I mean, once a month we actually bring in Hello Fresh, if I can say that.
Oh,
And
nice.
so
Good
that's
idea.
3 kind of special meals that we'll have this week, actually.
Nice.
So, are they favorites? I don't do the favorite thing. I like it all.
Cool.
Are you the grill master? Do you grill?
I am a grill person. Master would be a loose interpretation of that.
Okay, that's good. We appreciate the clarity.
You know what, I have to be honest, it's hard for me to narrow it down. Bonnie is like a super cook all the time.
Also
And
fancy.
so, yes, also fancy. So I would say she's made a few like baked chicken things early on that were like super good. She like bakes chicken with mushrooms and spinach and all of the things and bakes it. Those are like chicken thighs baked. They're kind of yummy, but we're not doing our favorite. So that's been one of my really awesome things. And then she does all of the side things for it. So I would be like Dave. I would be hard to pick a favorite, but I really love food, which is different than Dave. So.
Now, but I have a question, Mark. How can anybody eat mushrooms?
Yeah,
I am
Oh.
on that side too.
They're
That
a
sounds
fungus. I mean, they're yucky. I mean,
oh my goodness.
mushrooms are not to be eaten. They're to be
Yeah,
taken out of the
mushrooms.
ground and
Mushrooms
thrown away.
are a very divided food group. I agree. Yeah,
That's
Wow.
true.
I do like
Where
them.
do you land, Glenn? Yeah, you
I
like
like
them? I
them,
like
yeah.
them too.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I just like food, unfortunately.
I like it too.
I love food. I think over the isolation, we've been making a lot of food at home, and I think we've stepped up our game. There's been a lot of meals that were like, this was like way better than what we could get at a restaurant.
But have you baked sourdough, Levi? Because really,
we don't make sourdough, but Jordana makes all like artisan bread.
Oh my goodness, amazing!
So yeah, and buns and like, so we haven't really been buying any bread, no buns, anything like that. It's all homemade. So that's been pretty like special. I'd say our biggest win is we've been having pizza probably once a week, and so it's homemade dough for the crust. Jordana like bakes it a little bit in the oven, and then we finish it off on the stone in the barbecue to get like a fiery flavor. And then we just are picking like different pizzas that we'd want. So we've made like a barbecue chicken one. We've tried to do like a Thai one that we've had. So we actually like think about pizzas that we've had in the past, and we try to outdo it.
Wow.
And I'd say like, I might not even really want to go back to Two Guys. Like that's like the quality of our pizza is very high.
What?
Yeah.
I went to Two Guys today.
So is this a new career for you?
I don't know if it's a new career, but we're excited to have people over because we feel like we perfected it enough that like if people come over, we've got that meal ready to go that just goes, yeah, everyone's gonna like it. It's a crowd pleaser. So
people who are watching this podcast, is this an invitation for them to come over to the house?
No. But soon. Yes. And I mean, we can always share like our techniques. Like you have to get a pizza stone though. That's the big plus here.
Yeah.
Dave doesn't know if he's got that.
He doesn't. Julie hasn't told him if they have that or not.
We should have Dave and Julie on the podcast.
All right, guys, it's time to get to the message. So this week we had Pastor Dave E-Free with us, and we have him actually on the podcast today. I think this is going to be something that we're going to do probably mostly through the summer, is we're going to actually have the person who preached on Sunday join us for the podcast if we can, to maybe go through what we've heard and help us through it a little bit more. Obviously, you also see that Luke is not with us. He's on parental leave, so I hope he's enjoying his time off. Hopefully he still listens to our podcast and finds it as hilarious as everyone else does.
I think he started just today, right? So he's like, this week is his first. Yeah,
he was willing to come back and do the podcast because he loves it that much.
And we actually told him no. We're like, no, you're not allowed.
He said no. We need Dave E-Free.
Yeah. He needs to take a break.
Amen.
Luke is irreplaceable. I can't replace him.
You are today. Don't tell Luke.
So this week, like I said, we had Dave preaching, and he talked about Daniel chapter 6, which is Daniel in the lion's den. And he talked about how it means to live with integrity, a state of being that is complete, whole, undivided. So my first question for you guys is, how did we see Daniel live with integrity?
How did we see Daniel live with integrity? Well, you had the administrators after Daniel's head because he was getting promoted ahead of them. And so they tried to find, chinks in his integrity. They looked and see whether he had any corruption going on, any bribes behind the scene, I suppose, or something like that, which would have been fairly standard for the government back then. I won't go there, but for back then, the government, it was pretty standard. So they looked for that in Daniel, and they couldn't find any corruption. So next they looked and they tried to find if he was incompetent or lazy, just taking the accolades and the money behind the scene and really not doing any work, just cruising along. And they looked at him that way and found out that no, there was no incompetence there, no laziness there. So, you know, they looked and what would be, he's the administrator. He was being promoted to what would be like a prime minister today, something like that. And so they're trying to say if he's up to the job or not. If he claims to be that, is he really doing that? Is he whole? Is he complete? And they looked for that in Daniel and they couldn't find it. He was completely trustworthy.
So bringing it into our current context today, why do we think living with integrity is so important? So like in today's world, why is living with integrity so important then?
Would it, like, I think, is there like a relation to like even Daniel, the way Dave described Daniel, he talked about somebody that was like different and like stood out, right? So the chiefs didn't believe this about him. The people that were trying to decide if he was right for this position or was eligible for this position, that they couldn't believe that he lived this way, this integrous life. And it sort of, it set him apart. Is that something that today, the reason that potentially today integrity could be so important is because it actually sets us apart from sort of kind of half truth, lack of integrity, or I don't know, it seems like it's so different when you find somebody that lives with integrity and that is truthful, and that's how their whole world functions. It's not the same as everybody else, and so that person sort of stands out for you.
It's really interesting too how like Daniel was so, like, he didn't rail against everything that happened obviously in this culture, or we're not getting the sense of that, but he lived like in this personal integrity. So he wasn't ensuring everybody else lived by his integrity. He was saying, I will not stop praying. This is my connection to God. And so he had like the things that he would not bend on. So there's so many things in him he wouldn't bend, but he also doesn't sound like he is this loud voice that's like clanging a gong in the background saying, hey, you all need to. He just was living with this like personal integrity. And I wonder if we need a little bit of that, because we're such a noisy culture. So we like to talk about this for everybody else. And so it was a reminder to me, like, what's my personal integrity? Do I have a divided heart in any way?
Yeah, there's a sense of humility there. Like Daniel, it never says that Daniel talks about his integrity, right? Like, I mean, at least I haven't read it that way, where I've seen Daniel going off about how his way is the right way. He does stand firm in what he believes about who God is, and he shares that, but he doesn't necessarily go off on how like he is the most he has the most integrity out of everyone.
Yeah, he didn't put himself out there as well. He chose things. You alluded to that, Glenda. Go back to chapter 1. You know, they changed his name. They touched his identity there. They changed his name, but he didn't go against that. He kept on to that. They put him into all kinds of training, which would have been suspect as far as where he came from. But he went along with that. He got into that training. Now, he chose to stand in regards of what he ate. And it's interesting, he didn't make an announcement to the country about that. He went quietly to his supervisor and said, you know, let's put a test out here.
Yeah, let's try this.
Are you willing to do this? So yeah, he wasn't known at all for what he was against. He just let his life stand and know for what he was for. And you see that here in Daniel chapter 6 too. And that's why I think he was trusted by the king, because he was trustworthy. He knew that he wasn't behind the back, you know, grabbing stuff for himself and letting the king's interests go by the wayside. No, he was just the opposite. He kept his head down. He did his job, and he was known for that integrity. Integrity couldn't be found, but he was also known for that identity of his. They knew that he served his God.
I think it's interesting too that you use the word trustworthy. And I think in our culture now, people also want to see that trustworthiness. Like they are going to say, actually, you say you believe this, but in your actions, this is what I see. And really, we just have an intolerance for that in culture. We don't like.
Yeah, it's another way of saying, I think, like as I came along, I'm older than you guys. As I came along, the big criticism against Christians was that they were hypocrites.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're talking about hypocrisy here in Daniel chapter 6. We're just not using the word. We're using a positive flip on the word, and that's integrity. Hypocrisy would be the opposite of integrity.
Right.
And so that's what comes into play here. What you say you are you really that person?
Right.
Now, culture is looking for people that they can trust. I agree with you, Glenda. Over and over, we find that in culture today, all kinds of studies keep coming out about how deceptive and how lying has become an everyday part of people's lives today. Now, I don't know if that's something new or whether we're just recognizing it. I don't even want to go there and argue that, but still it's a reality. You can't trust somebody because that deception is there all the time. But Daniel was trustworthy, and I think we're called upon to be trustworthy.
Yeah, we make that assumption lots, especially of leaders, politics, like things like that. We just assume hypocrisy in some ways. And I think that's why at times people prefer leaders, even if they're not saying what they want them to say. If they sound like they're being authentic, they'll still pick them. It's actually kind of amazing to me.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I actually like that you actually kind of alluded to this in the integrity piece, but I like that you linked it to his identity in Christ, right? Like you said before, even his integrity didn't stop him from praying. It didn't stop him from worshiping his God because that's where his identity was. And I think you said something like, is a way, like praying is a way we become ourselves, or some sort of quote like that, of praying and being like Christ, something along those lines.
So God isn't a problem solver, but a person creator. That's one of the things.
Yeah, that was Eugene Peterson.
But something you said, something, maybe it was a quote, but it said something like praying and being a Christian or following Christ is a way that we more become ourselves, or something like that.
Yeah, again, that's Peterson. He said prayer is not a way in which we order things. It is a way in which we become ordered. We are most ourselves when we pray. That's Peterson's words, but I think he's right about that. We're most vulnerable and most ourselves before God when we pray. God is not so much a problem solver as a person creator.
Yeah, I love that actually, because I think that it talks about not only his integrity, but the fact that his identity was there. It was already locked. God had already given, like he knew where it was. And so living a life of integrity, following God was just what he was doing, because that was his identity, which is pretty sweet. I think I like those two, the link together.
Yeah, Daniel was known as one who served God. His identity was known, and we see that in this aspect of prayer. Right. So how do we value prayer? How is your identity wrapped up in prayer?
And that's such an interesting thought, because I think prayer is a struggle for lots of people. And I think a lot of my life too, it was a struggle in the last number of years. I think that's shifted in some ways, but people are hesitant. Like they're hesitant to pray publicly. They're hesitant to pray. We think that we have to have certain words, when really this is what God is asking us, is to come as we are, totally connected. Like sometimes when I'm driving in my car, I was driving to school, and which is about a 6-hour drive one day, and I was having this conversation thinking, I just wish I had somebody with me, and then I'd have a great conversation. And then I was thinking, actually, I'm just gonna pretend that like God is sitting in the seat next to me and literally just have a conversation. Like, man, God, I don't know, like, what do you think about this? Because I've been thinking about this and I don't know what to do with that. So it just ended up being this really, my conversations with God are shifting. But I really wonder if we understand the value of prayer.
I'm not sure we even recognize in ourselves how much we do pray if we're followers of Jesus. I think we struggle with the formalized prayer. You talked about praying in public, or even you may want to talk about, do you sit down each day and have 15 minutes set aside to where you pray, you talk to God. We struggle with the formalized side of prayer. And okay, like the formalized side of prayer is real. It's throughout Scripture, so I'm not putting that aside. But if we think in our lives about the informal side of prayer, we often go to Paul's pray without ceasing, and that's a fair place to go, but that doesn't say it all. We are in communication. I mean, I find myself in communication with God quite often, and not in a formal way, though I do that. In fact, I guess for myself personally, if I measured my effectiveness in my prayer life on the formal prayer side, then I would wrestle with where I am prayer-wise. But if I look and add to that the informal side, I realize that I'm in communication with God quite often. In fact, over and over again, it's quite time, somebody's coming to talk to me and I have no idea what it's all about. And then immediately I'm going, all right, Lord, this is coming. I don't know what to say. And so would you just be here present, and would you guide my thoughts? Would you guide my words? Would you guide the person that's coming so that we can have this conversation together? And so that races through my mind. It's just like Nehemiah when he was going to talk to the king about going back to Jerusalem. It says that he shot a prayer to heaven and then he talked to the king. Well, there's that type of aerogram type of praying that goes on quite often in our lives, and I think we don't recognize that in the way that we should.
Yeah, that's really good. Actually, that took a long time for me to get to this, what you're talking about, I think, because it's always a structured prayer that we push to, so I have to get over the guilt of not sitting for 20 minutes at a time and praying, but I think for me, I do spend time praying, and I think for me, I spend more time the way you're talking, Dave, is that in every situation, in the times when it's quiet, in the times when I am going into places or celebrating or have joy, or those sort of, I feel like, what did you call them, arrow prayers or something, those are maybe more of what I would do, as opposed to hours on end sitting and praying, or half an hour at a time, or I feel like it actually alleviates the guilt of I never spend 20 minutes at a time praying, is that I actually feel like I spend more time talking to God when I am intentional about it being a part of all of my day.
Yeah. I want to be careful, though, and not pull away from Daniel 6, and that what we're talking about with Daniel was formalized prayer.
Right, that's right. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was the Jewish process at that time. 3 times a day, they knelt before the Lord and they prayed. And part of the Shema would be there. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. The Lord is one. And they would go from there. And so that was a formalized way of praying. That was part of who they were and how they reflected that. And I think people, and Daniel's identity, people knew that. That's why it says there in Daniel 6 that they couldn't catch him in his professional life. They couldn't catch him in his integrity. So they went after his religious life. They knew that he prayed. That was known. That was part of his identity. So they knew he prayed. They attacked him there. So we'll make that against the law. And we'll get him. We know we can get him there.
Wow. So Dave asked us to look at our lives and ask, are we who we say we are? Do our heart, head, hands, do they all line up? In what ways do you see a gap between what you say you believe and how you live that out?
Worry.
Worry.
Worry is a gap. Mind the gap. Worry is a bit of the gap, because I can say, oh God, like, I trust you. I know you have this. I know you love this person, like my kids or my grandkids, more than I do. I know this, and then I worry. So it's like I borrow it back from him.
I would say maybe some of the control pieces, and I don't always feel like I need to be in control, but the things that I want to be in control of, I sort of take back. It's probably too, hey God, I know you control this, and then when it's not exactly going exactly how I want, I try to control it, which doesn't normally end well either.
Well, I guess my gap that would be in this area of prayer. I'm just the opposite of you, Glenda. My personality, I'm laid back. Not that that worry's unknown to me, but it's not a really outrageous factor in my life. I don't worry a lot. I just kind of accept things the way they are. I think then that goes to the opposite side for me, because in prayer, where God tells us to come and ask, He tells us to come and ask for things. We get that from the parable. Be persistent. Forget the exact words. It's there. Be audacious is the word that's there in Luke. And coming to God and laying before Him what you want, what you ask for. I know that has its own problems, but I think my problem is I'm so laid back that I don't ask enough. And so I think I gap there. It's not that I'm afraid to ask. It's just I'm more like the 3 children in the furnace, God's able to save me. Sure, I believe that. And if He doesn't, Jesus in Gethsemane, not my will, but the Lord's will. Well, I'm content to be there. But I think that sometimes puts me in a position of not asking enough.
Interesting.
I feel like I've been in where Glenda is. I've felt that. I've felt what Mark said too. I'm like, wow, those are gaps. Like I've felt definitely. If I feel like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of what's the biggest gap. I think that's like initiative. I know I'm gonna have to explain this one a little bit, but like I really believe that we need to be pursuing relationship with God. Like that's on us to pursue that, and to be reading our Bibles, to be in prayer, to be doing all of these things so that we can be in relationship with God. And I find myself often going back and living that out in a lazy way, where I can find myself easily not in a good rhythm of reading my Bible if I don't watch myself, of not praying. And so I feel like often there's a gap there of what I believe and how I need to be pursuing. But when I actually live it out, often I get into a lazy way. So yeah.
Pretty common, I would say.
Pretty common.
These
all of these things. Yeah.
These struggles are
all pretty common struggles. Yeah.
Yeah, I think people would relate to any one of these, and at some point, I can see myself in all of your stories.
Exactly. Yeah.
It kind of hurts a little, doesn't it? Glenda's like saying the worry thing. I'm like, I don't worry. And I'm like, hanging my head in shame.
I wouldn't even say I'm a big worrier, but boy, like that's when I can tell that I'm, boring.
Yeah, definitely.
I would say the same. I'm not a big like control person, but when I'm like, oh yeah, I did give that to God, and now I'm worrying and trying to control it. I would say the same. I'd be laid back enough to be like, sort of things will happen. So I think the reality is, I think, Glenda, what you just said, I think we know that we're not going to ever reach perfection in any of these things ever in our lives. We know that. That's the beauty of the redemptive sort of story that we're living. But it's hard. Like, I think mining the gap is difficult in different seasons of our life. I think everybody, this is now, and give me a week or two and I'll tell you another thing that I have a problem that I'm struggling with.
Well, I think it's living within the framework and not using it as an excuse, but within the framework of our humanness.
Right.
I mean, we are still broken people. We're not.
Right.
We're not put together. We talk about integrity being this wholeness. Well, that's true, but that in this side of heaven, that's an imperfect wholeness that's
Right.
there, and so we're not all together. And even thinking about worry, I don't see how in our humanness we can't be concerned about something in our lives that's worth being concerned about.
Right.
We've lost our job, so we're not allowed to worry? Well, of course not. Yes, we're allowed to be concerned and in turmoil over what's going on. Again, this is an acreism, but I think that there's a place in which you cross the line from being concerned or worry into anxiety. And so Philippians 4, it says, stop being anxious. It doesn't say not to worry, it says stop being anxious. And you get to the place to where that worry is consuming you and controlling you, and it gets out of whack, in that sense.
Right.
Then we've crossed a line that's a danger point for us.
Yeah.
But to say that in our humanity, we're not going to, our humanness, we're not going to somehow experience concern in a concerning situation, I think that's putting our head in the sand.
So God does the clarifying. He brings wisdom. What ways has God clarified you and led you to wisdom?
I was thinking about this when Dave was talking about that there's things in our lives that we can kind of, and I think everybody does it in some way, but you can think, okay, this piece I'm going to pull away. So how can you, like, we would look at people and situations and think, how can you be unfaithful to your spouse, or look at porn or something and love your wife? Well, we just can, because we divide our hearts a little bit, right? So we take, not a little bit, we divide our hearts. So we do both those things, and both of them can like really exist, but what it leaves us with is a divided heart. So I was thinking, what divides my heart? What ways can I believe lies about certain things, or disobey in certain things, and what ways can I not? And I think I can be a really critical thinker, and I think that's something that's good, but at times I know that turns into critical, having a critical spirit. And so that's a way I can make an excuse for being critically thinking, and okay, that's okay for me to have this spirit. It's not. And in that way, I divide my heart. And that just is ways that we get pulled apart and become not wholehearted people.
I don't know where you're going, Levi, with questions even further down the line here, if there are others, but the clarifying that God is doing, he's not making something clear to us. It's through us, he's making himself clear to other people. He's clarifying who he is to other people through us, through our identity, through our integrity. And that's why I went to Jesus and Peter and Paul, right, to reinforce that from the New Testament. This wasn't just some idea pulled out from this particular text. And so I think it's an outward-looking thing at this point from Daniel 6 more than it is an inward-looking thing. Now, our tendency is to look inward. I understand that fully. I'm involved in that all the time. But it's an outward-looking thing that if we want to talk about, I said, don't name this evangelism. That's not an anti-evangelism rant on my part. But, evangelism is to plan a salvation, share the gospel, whatever, and some type of plan to be able to do that. This is beyond that. This is witness. And our lives witness in such a way that God uses us to clarify to other people who he is. And to me, that's outstanding. I mean, it takes the responsibility from me, and not that I need to be taken away, because there is some responsibility in ourselves too, but it takes the responsibility from me. I don't have to explain God to other people. I show God to other people in my
from your
living,
wholehearted,
in my integrity,
your wholeheartedness.
from my whole heart.
Yeah,
I
but
show
that's,
God
but we can be not
to other people.
wholehearted too. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, I couldn't add it in yesterday, but I have a prayer. I worried for a long time because people would always say, God gave me a life verse, and this is my life verse.
I love
And
your
walked
prayer.
through
I love your
decades of
prayer
my-
before you preach.
Well, I have that one. That's for my preaching. But this is a life verse that finally God gave me one. And I said, thank you, Lord. I felt deficient that I didn't have a life verse. But here it is. And it's something now that I pray. I don't pray it every day, but several times a week I'll find myself praying. It's from Psalm 86:11. Teach me your way, O Lord, and I will walk in your truth. So there's a promise. There's a commitment on my part. Teach me your way, and I will walk in your truth. Now here's the phrase that goes along with this. Give me an undivided heart that I may fear, in a sense of worship, fear your name. And so that's, if I have a life verse, that's my life verse now. And this undivided heart comes along with that. Or if you teach me your way, I'll walk in your truth. But I recognize you got to do something with my undivided heart, with my divided heart. Give me an undivided heart.
So what do you think that means to you? What does an undivided heart mean?
Well, an undivided heart in my mind is that it's easy for me in my head, in my mind, to say what I want. And even for my heart to get involved in my desires, even say my desires are that way. But then there's a problem when it comes to the hands. The actions aren't always there. And to me, it's in the hands part that the breakdown most often comes in my life. Now, the breakdown comes in the heart for a lot of people's lives too.
Yeah.
Their desires are there. I'm not perfect, police, but I don't have a desire problem. At least I don't sense I have a desire problem. If I'm going to break down in this integrity thing, it's going to be in the hands. It's going to be in the outworking of that. So.
Cool. That is very interesting. Yeah. And it's good that I feel like that clarifying that God is going to reveal himself. Just shows that it isn't fully dependent. Like, we are going to be faulted and flawed. So yet, even in that situation, even in those times, God will make it clear.
Daniel is one of the only characters in the Bible in which there's no recorded sin on his part.
Job
you look
too,
through
right?
the book of Daniel, I can't find a place where he sinned. We could read the book of Daniel and just think, well, that's easy for him. It's automatic. Look at him. He didn't even sin. Well, no, we can't look at Daniel that way. Daniel was human. And I can't believe that he was sinless. In fact, I know that he wasn't sinless. So his integrity had to be something that he also had to work at.
Yeah.
Even though it's not portrayed that way in the book of Daniel.
Well, friends, it's been great discussing this stuff with you guys. It's time to move to On the Lighter Side.
On the lighter side.
Today's On the Lighter Side question, or topic, I should say. Jeff talked about a relaunch plan this week. How are you guys feeling about that? How does it make you feel, the relaunch plan?
Yeah, if people are watching this or listening to this and they haven't seen that, check it out on YouTube or Facebook and just Google search the church and you'll find it in there. But I thought it was good. I think it was, it is so divided. It's divided in culture. It's divided in my own head. that like sometimes I'm like, oh man, we got to go back, and other times I'm like, why would we go back? There's so many things we can't do, and there's so many obstacles, and we just don't want people. I just keep thinking, I just don't want anyone to get sick. So I think it's good to hear a plan, because if we don't hear anything, then everyone fills in the gap with whatever's going on in their head, including me. So I will just think, oh, I can assume lots of different things about us as a church if I'm not I'm not given any information. So there's ways that we can fill in the gap. So I was glad to get information, and I am glad to see that we're moving forward.
I would say similar things, that we're divided. I think that there are some things about going back that won't be the same. Like, I think our rose-colored glasses to feel like it's going to be the same it's not going to be the same. But there's something about the community of going back that is valuable and a part of who we are, that makes people excited, that there's actually like down the road, there's a light at the end of the tunnel that says we're going to be able to be worshiping together at some level, whatever this looks like. So but I mean, people's health and safety is really important. I can understand the anxiety of going back and being in big groups of people. I'm curious when all of these sort of things are going to be, or what they're going to look like when we start to do that again. But I don't know. I think the idea of thinking about that we will get back together is like a light that we didn't see for a long time. Even the relaunch plans from the government were slow to come, with zero sort of real plans in it. So this at least gives us we are thinking and moving that direction. This is the idea of gathering is actually important. So,
well, it's not over with, is it? And
no.
So even a relaunch plan is a good thing, and I agree, absolutely, it's a good thing. But like last Friday, the seniors, the prime timers in the church got together. Don't get too excited. It was on the church parking lot in the back, so we couldn't be seen by everybody. And we stayed, well, relatively social distance. It showed to me how difficult it's going to be to maintain social distancing at church when we come back in smaller groups. It's going to be very difficult. I thought our seniors, as they met together, and by the way, there ended up to be about 80 of us back there. And so the point is that we're longing to be back together. And they were longing to be back together. And it's hard to come back together and still maintain, and still, stick with the rules, still maintain the distancing that needs to be maintained. And I agree, we all have this idea we're going to go back to the way things were, and we're not going to go back to the way things were. With the restrictions that are there, we can't. And so I think we're going to find out. I've tried to measure it in my own heart this way. What are we missing by not gathering on a Sunday morning? Well, you have the community factors there. As I talk, asking questions from the seniors, many of them asked that question. They said that they wanted that community back. But there's something else. See, before, whether we had trained ourselves or whatever, but when we were together in that joint worship service, wherever it was that you were at, whether in the gym or the worship center or however, that we had together, and for lack of a better phrase, I've called it, we had together a sacred experience. And it's not just a community that we're missing. Yeah, we're missing that. But it's that sacred experience that we're missing. Now, I know I speak for myself, and so please, I'm not making a blanket statement here. I don't get that same sacred experience from an online service. I get an experience, but it's not that same sacred experience.
Yeah, for sure.
By the way, that's not a negative statement, but I hear that. It's not. And I think we're missing that. We're longing for that. And how we're going to have to go back is going to be very difficult to re-catch that, because things are still going to be different even though we're together. So I've got mixed feelings. Yeah, I think we should have a plan. I think we should be staging ourselves back. But I think we're going to have to be very realistic in our own minds and hearts to realize it's not going to be the same as it was. And so there's going to be that disappointment factor that's going to go along with the fact that we're getting back in some measure. So yeah, I applaud the plan. I just hope that we can keep our expectations in the right place as we go.
I think too, there's an idea out there that like, if the church doesn't, like if we don't do anything, then we're kind of taking the easy way out a little bit, that we've like almost disappointing people. And so I just like, I don't know how you guys feel, but like this has never been taken lightly. This is continual discussions, lots of prayer. It's just, I mean, this is something that we're taking really seriously. We're not taking, I don't think the easy way out is even on the table ever, first of all.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even by maybe us saying in the beginning, us going back into just doing online services, that wasn't an easy out for us. Yeah. I'd say we've worked even harder than we have when we were in person. Yeah. The wear on staff has been incredible. And so, yeah, like I think there's a lot behind the scenes that people don't always see. And so I feel for our staff that have had to shift things and move things online. And because it's hidden, it's not as visible. It can be seen as maybe less work, but it actually isn't. No. It's been a lot of work for us. And so,
they're not afraid. I mean, this staff is not afraid of that kind of hard work. Like we will shift, we will get it done. We have a large staff and we can do it. And so it isn't because of those things. There is so much thought going into this. It's just, we don't want to be too, I mean, we're just taking safety really seriously and what is best to do next really seriously. So I think and this is in line with our mission and vision too.
Oh, definitely. It's a very thin line that we have to walk of safety and wanting to gather. Our vision and our mission says that we value relationship and we value people. And so we value people, so we're caring for people, but we also value people because we want them to be in relationship. So where do those two things meet? And that's the plan that we have to come up with. And so, it's not been easy. I think I'm happy with the relaunch plan. Like it's,
yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, it's good. It's got all the precautions from the government. Well, we still can meet for those people who want to, but I'm really happy to hear that, online services and stuff like that for people like myself who that has been a really good thing for us in this time to stay safe. That's a positive. It's not forcing anyone that this is the only way that E-Free is going to be meeting is in person. We're actually going to be doing both options in the future, and people can gather in the ways that they feel comfortable with. And
the easy way out would for us to just slip everything back to normal. The hard way forward is making shifts. So there's shifts that are needing to be made, and trying to be nimble with those things too. But we also want to experience the reward of relationship, and it is tiring to give and in so many ways, and yet you don't get that you don't just see that connection. So I am missing people, missing relationship.
I think a lot of people, if you know me personally, and I've talked to you guys about my personal views of safety during COVID, some people might take that as being not for relationship, but that's totally not my heart. Like I'm so longing to be in relationship, and I've had tear-filled nights just missing people. I'm very relational, and so that's not on the other side though. When people make statements about like we need to be gathering because of relationship, the other side can also feel, like they're saying I don't value relationship because I want a social distance. And so I think, we just have to be mindful of both sides that we're walking a thin line. Both people care about relationships. Both people care about people and their health. And so, I feel like we are entering into a new stage for our church, and every single week something is new. And so, yeah, it's been an interesting time to be part of it. And at the same time, I wouldn't trade it. Like I'm happy to be part of it. Yeah. Well, I think that concludes our show, our episode for today. I'd love to say, see you guys next week.
See you next week. Glad
See you, everybody. Thanks for this time. Thanks, Dave.
See ya.